This is Tom negotiating with Jesus. Getting ready for a Bible study tonight, but today, right now, I'm going to read Mark 8. The good news according to Mark, which is gospel. In those days, there was another large crowd with nothing to eat. Another one. He had fed 5,000 before. So Jesus called to his disciples and said, I have compassion on the crowd because they have already been here with me 3 days, and they have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from a great distance. His disciples answered him, Where are we going to get enough bread in this desolate place to satisfy these people? He asked them, How many loaves do you have? They replied, 7. Then he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground. He took the 7 loaves and gave thanks. He broke them and began giving them to the disciples to serve. So they served the crowd. They also had a few small fish. After giving thanks for these, he told them to serve them as well. Serve these as well. Everyone ate and was satisfied, and they picked up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. Now that is miraculous, obviously. It doesn't happen typically because it would be a miracle. It would be... Now, when I say it doesn't happen typically, I have my own thoughts on miracles because I think they do happen typically. We just don't notice the regular miracles that go on about us all the time. So I'm not going to talk about that, but there were about 4,000 who ate. Then he dismissed them. Immediately, he got into a boat with his disciples and went to the district of Dalmanutha. Never heard of it. Then the Pharisees came and began to argue with Jesus, asking for a sign from heaven to test him. Sighing deeply in his spirit, he said, Why does this generation look for a sign? I tell you the truth. No sign will be given to this generation. As if he wasn't giving signs galore. But they weren't satisfied with signs. It didn't matter what Jesus did. They were not interested in the Messiah coming at this time. There's something about that. They were not interested in a healer of all the odd things, of a miracle worker. They were not interested, and I'm sure they had aches and pains and loved ones who were ill. I'm sure they did, but they would sooner that they suffer and die than allow this unauthorized Messiah to come in without asking them permission and following their lead. There's something to that that is really hard to put your finger on. They want a sign. How can they not see the signs? Then he left them, got back into the boat, and went to the other side. Now they had forgotten to take bread. They had just seen that bread is not a problem, except for 1 loaf they had with them in the boat. And Jesus ordered them, Watch out, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the yeast of Herod. Yeast. So they began to discuss with one another about having no bread. When he learned of this, Jesus said to them, Why are you arguing about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Have your hearts been hardened? Though you have eyes, don't you see? And though you have ears, can't you hear? Don't you remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many baskets full of pieces did you pick up? They replied, 12. When I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many baskets full of pieces did you pick up? They replied, 7. Then he said to them, Do you still not understand? My commentary is, they still do not understand. The Pharisees don't understand. The people don't understand. The disciples don't understand. I don't really understand. Would I be smarter now that I know what I know? No, absolutely not. I would be as much of a thick-headed dope as anyone interacting with Jesus. Then they came to Bethsaida. They brought a blind man to Jesus and asked him to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and brought him outside of the village. He spit on his eyes, placed his hands on his eyes, and asked. He spit on his eyes. Then he spit on his hands. Put his hands on his eyes and asked, "Do you see anything?" Regaining his sight, he said, "I see people, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again. And he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, Do not even go into the village. Just go home. Then Jesus and his disciples went to the village of Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea, I think is how they often pronounce it. Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They said, "John the Baptist. Others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. Then Jesus began to teach that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and experts in the law, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke openly about this, so Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. And after turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are not setting your mind on God's interests, but on man's." Peter just said, "You're the Christ." And now he says he will not allow Jesus. Peter took him and began to rebuke him when he said he was going to be killed. He got a big rebuke back. Then Jesus called to the crowd along with his disciples and said to them, "If anyone wants to become my follower, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life because of me and because of the gospel will save it. For what benefit is it for a person to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his life? What can a person give in exchange for his life? For if anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." That is the end of that chapter, so there you go. Only 8 minutes.